This is The Dig on the Huskers Radio Network podcast. Powered by Emeritus. Featuring Nebraska volleyball assistant coach Jordan Larson. Here's your host, Jessica Coody.
Welcome back into another episode of The Dig. I'm Jessica Coody, and this week joined in studio by assistant coach Jordan Larson for the first time this season. Thanks so much. Great to have you back in studio.
Yeah, excited to be back.
What a week for you guys. Played some great volleyball. How did you guys evaluate how the team did over the three matches against Creighton and Arizona State and Wichita State?
Yeah, it was a full week. It feels like this preseason has been going on forever, but just really proud of our girls. We've had some resiliency through the week. Obviously, Creighton was great, a great match, and I thought that we came back against ASU and just really started out strong, and then obviously finished out with Wichita State, which was a just all-around great match for us.
Coach Cook had talked about after the Arizona State game, that was probably the best serving team that you guys have faced so far, and that felt like the team did a really good job with that. How does that change? I guess, how do you go about being good against the serve? Is it more of a focus thing on the game plan? How does that improve like that?
Yeah, I think it's just we are already a pretty good receiving team, so I think just a little more attention to detail, and I think the more dialed in, we're always pretty dialed, but I think the more dialed in of like, hey, this team, has pretty high serving percentages, so can we be a little more aware of that going into this match? But in general, I think we handle ourselves, but at this level, it's hard to be consistent, over the season. So I'm just really proud of them for kind of resetting and coming in and doing a good job of that.
When you prepare for someone that's got really good servers, is it you watch a lot of film, try to get tendencies, and I guess how do you go about preparing for that?
Yeah, we're lucky that we have a lot of helping hands in practice, and so we try to imitate kind of what's going to be coming at us and try and get them to see it as much as they can. And we sprinkle in some video there, but sometimes just seeing it live is much better, and it translates a lot better.
Absolutely. So then Lauren and JB were talking on the broadcast, the Wichita State game could maybe be a trap game with everything going on and bouncing back, but man, you got to be pleased with how the team came out and was focused against Wichita State.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, you never know, and after 3 matches in 1 week too, it's hard to kind of get yourself emotionally up to that level, and so I thought we did a really good job coming out strong, and we had a few changes in lineup as well, so I think kudos to our team for just finding a way, no matter who's out there, and I think it's important to have those situations as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too, just, with so much depth and never knowing when your number might get called. You've been on teams, I'm sure, that are loaded with talent. As a player, how do you stay ready for that and kind of stay in a rhythm as a team? Yeah,
it's hard, and I think, like you said, but I think that's one of the coolest things about coming here is, like, you're competing against the best every day, and if you want to have a long career, like, you got to do that your whole career. So you get used to understanding what that is and how can you be comfortable being uncomfortable, because there's not a day in our gym that's exactly comfortable. So, and I think just having that mindset going into games as well is just, you never know. And some teams require different things and different assets, and we're lucky that we have a lot of depth to do that. But as a player, it's hard, and I think just constantly preaching that, like, I think Coach Cook's term is like you're renting the starting place, like it's just, you never know. And you've seen a lot of stories too where there's been a lot of great players that have been in certain roles and then have turned it around, and you just never know how the season can end. So,
not just, personally, but what does that say about the team too, that, with Bergen working with different setter or different hitters just the different rotations that you guys could keep the chemistry going even despite the changes in the lineup? Yeah,
it is hard, and I think just the more we can, we talk about front loading, the more we can talk about it, the more we get it out in the open, the better it is, and the more clarity we try to provide. But at the end of the day, it's like, no matter what stimulus or what option is coming at us, can we still be comfortable in finding comfort in that? And so it's hard, but I think the more we talk about it, the more it becomes normal, and you just get comfortable in that situation.
How much of a luxury is it when you have the kind of week that you had last week to have so many people you can call on and not miss a beat?
Yeah, it's a fantastic asset for sure, and very lucky in that. But I think it's also a trap that you could fall down to. It's like chemistry, and like, how do you define chemistry and what does that look like? And I think it's just being really sensitive to that in all teams. And I think one of the greatest things about being here is having a healthy culture, and if someone has things they need to talk about, like having open door policy and just consistently being attentive to those situations, because that's for me, it's 60% of what makes a team great is chemistry and how to be a good teammate.
When you look at the box score post matches and you're seeing, 7 kills, 8 kills, 10 kills, 11 kills by multiple people that are averaging so many contributions night in and night out, what do you take away from that when you look at those final stats?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think stats can kind of be, I don't know, I'm not really a numbers person. I obviously think it's important, but for me, it's kind of the way the game is played, because sometimes there's stats out there that really don't paint the full picture. And so I think you can get caught up in yes, we have diversity, but then how are we attacking the game, and what can we see within play that matters? And so I think there's a lot of ways to win a game, and sometimes the stats define that, but other times there's a lot of things in gray area that aren't actually detailed on that as well. So, but I think it's really cool that Bergen does a nice job of creating balance as well.
So I'm going to throw another number at you then, just after you just say that, because Coach Hook was talking about this too after the game, but the sight-out percentage I think was 79%. Can you take us through that and what that says and what that means and what you guys are looking for in that area?
Yeah, obviously when we can sight out and kill at a high percentage, you win a lot of matches. But I can tell you from my personal experience, I probably wouldn't be the player I am. I wasn't the highest hitting percentage outside. I was strategic about how I was placing points and kills, and I think that I don't know, sometimes you're out of system a lot, and can we be strategic about where we're placing those balls? But again, if you're sighting out at a high percentage, you're winning a lot of games. So kind of where do you want to put your money, but also teaching our players that there's a lot of ways to be successful as well.
Got to be a balance, right, between being able to handle the out of system, but then also being efficient when you are in system.
Exactly. And can we do both? But again, I think it's just more the attention to detail, when things aren't going well, and how can we problem solve as quickly as possible. And again, stats, don't really see that to some degree. So I don't know. I probably err on the side of not so many numbers, which I don't know if is a good thing, but.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. Going into year number 2 coaching here, how do you feel different? What's been different? What's felt different for you going into year 2?
Yeah, it's just great to be back. I mean, I think just the relationships that I have with the girls, and I definitely feel just more of where I can maybe give, and I'm still learning and trying to give myself grace of what's too much, what's too little, and I'm realizing just even the stats comment, how much is too much stats for me personally, and how much do I get caught up in that versus just what is my eye seeing, and what would I naturally go to as a player, and it's been fun. I enjoy going to work every day.
So you as a player didn't necessarily get locked in on those numbers as much?
No, I remember in college, I was pretty, I was oh my gosh, I hit this, and I remember being so mentally about the numbers that I lost track of the ability to compete. And I think that having a general idea of what that is important, but for me personally, it took away from my ability to compete in the moment, and actually being strategic about what's actually happening in front of me, because if I get caught up in that, then I just lost all things. So even as a coach, it's I find myself saying if a player hits a ball out of bounds and it's out by a foot, it's man, you were at least going for it. I love that attack mentality versus, oh man, I just made 2 errors in a row and now I'm going back and being tentative. I would rather err on the side of hey man, I erred, I went for it, and you just never know. So
yeah, fascinating. And it's also important too to remember that every player is wired differently. So so you might not have been driven by the number. Some people might. It's just understanding probably the different preferences of players too.
Exactly. And I think that's for me too, is finding out what is too much, what is not enough. Hey, we need to aim for this, because obviously numbers do tell a story, and so can you but also depict what that is. And I don't know. I just think that, I don't know, I had this one coach overseas. He's there's a, you need a key for every game has a different key. You just have to figure out how to pick the lock, basically. So it's, for whatever reason, that has just resonated with me. Is just you think that you want to have the same approach to every game, when in reality it's a whole new set of things, which is probably pretty obvious. But for my mind, it was all right, well, if I'm thinking I can hit sharp here that game, I can't do it the next game. So what do I need to change? And that's very much decision based on the moment. And if I get caught up in the numbers, I get too mental. So
That's a great perspective. I mean, and you have so much experience in that regard. How much have you enjoyed passing that knowledge along to these players?
Yeah, it's been great. And again, but I think I've erred on the side of like how much is too much, because I was a pretty cerebral player. Like I could take on a lot and I wanted to know why a lot. But some players just do better with less. And so again, understanding what player is that and what player needs more. And yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Merritt Beason was a big story over the past week, and she was very honest when she's meeting with the media about, I had a slow start, but sometimes you got to take a step backwards to go 2 steps forward. Yeah. What have you seen in her approach and getting going over the last week?
Yeah, it's been awesome, and I think she's obviously a very talented player, but we've all had those moments of just things are harder. It's harder to kill a ball, and she puts a lot of pressure on herself, and so I think it's allowing herself some grace and some room to fail at times. But like she said, is sometimes you have to fail to get better. And I think it shows a lot of courage for her to be able to do that and be vulnerable. And I'm sure it's only going to continue to be better. But yeah, it's a tough thing to do and tough thing to go through as a player.
How do you go through it? How do you work through it when you are struggling a little bit? How do you continue to find ways to get it going?
Yeah. I think it's person to person, like what they got to figure out what works best for them. Sometimes it's watching more videos. Sometimes it's breaking down footwork. Sometimes it's, hey, I just need to step away from volleyball for a second. I need, my people just around and not think about volleyball. So I think it's a trial and error that they have to go through and trying to experiment kind of what works best. Because I think everything is different based off of each player.
One of the things Coach Cook talked about, too, against, I think it was Arizona State, was that the back row attack wasn't good enough. So when you guys are going from match to match, and sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not, how do you evaluate, okay, we've got to be better? How do you get better, I guess, when, especially in match, when it's not working the way that you want it to?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of communication with Bergen about like certain choices that are being made, obviously depending on how the block and defense is lining up as well. But sometimes in match, it's tough to like make big changes, right? It's back to the drawing board, and I'm glad we have 2 days now. We get a practice, before Wednesday, and because sometimes that's where biggest changes are made or in practice, obviously. But in match, it's tough. But I think it's just evaluating those decisions, and then also, where we can continue to find edges, when we need to.
There is, we just talked about how many people can get involved with the offense, but when you have the middles like Andy Jackson and Rebecca Alec and Layla Blackwell, how does that open things up for the hitters, and how nice is it when you have that threat that it's not all the pressure on the hitters getting those points?
It's great. I mean, our middles are all well-rounded, and it's really cool to see them running different patterns and getting in different spaces, and having them as an option is huge. And I think it goes back to one of your initial questions about the serve and pass game. The fact that we have one of the best passing teams in the nation is a huge asset for us, because we can run our middles, and that's a huge threat for us. The more we can create space with them, the better it is for our pins.
From your perspective too, how good is Bergen managing getting so many people involved too?
She's great. She's one player that is really unfazed when it comes to anything. You don't really see her demeanor change much, which is a great asset as a setter. You need that steadiness, and she's just quiet, calm, which it's a cool thing to watch. And there's times where she gets a little feisty, which I'm like, Bergen, I want to see more of that. But she's great, and true quarterback. I mean, really, it's cool.
So there was a term that was used on the broadcast the other day, echolocate?
Yes.
And Coach Cook credited you with that.
Oh, geez, I don't know about that.
It's something that he thought that you brought. Can you tell us about that, what that means, what it is?
Yeah. So we talk about just our hitters being able to call the ball loud enough for their setter to hear, because oftentimes setters, balls coming all different directions, and for them to be able to hear the hitter calling with intention, first of all, it draws the block on the other side. People don't know where the ball is going to go. And then secondly, sometimes when you call with intention and call with like a general like tandem, they can judge also based off tempo. So I found that calling with a sense of urgency and with kind of repetition, like they can judge and be able to set with more efficiency. So I don't know if I get credit for that, but it's just something we talk about on the national team a lot. It's just calling with intent and calling loud, and allows our setters to feel more rhythm.
So if you have two people that are calling with intent, then how do you go about which one you go to?
Yeah, I mean, that's just based off decisions for the setter, but I think having and hearing your hitters are available is a great option. And again, it distracts people on the other side of the net. Like if I'm a blocker on the other side and I'm hearing this person call like crazy, I'm going to be a little more interested in them, I think, and allows our setter to just be able to have a lot of options. Because sometimes when the ball's fast paced, you don't hear anything in the moment, and so having availability is huge.
Coach had mentioned the other day that he thought that Harper had done a really good job at that. How much has she improved in that area and calling for the ball with intent?
Yeah, I think she's doing a great job, and I mean, to be honest, all of our hitters are doing really well, and I think, and for me, it's all about taking space. I think we think of leadership as sometimes leading by action, but actually leading by voice, and that is one way to be able to hey man, I'm taking up space, I'm calling for what I want, and I'm gonna go get it. So. And I think even when you're calling it, there's this intentionality behind how you're approaching too. When you're calling loud and with some assertion, you're going to go for it, And so I think it's twofold: one for our setters, and then also one for our hitters as well.
Give some confidence to the setter to go back to the hitter.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's hard to even repeat within a rally. So if a player is calling one ball and then calling for it again, it's well, yeah, I'm going to have confidence to set that again.
Oh, yeah, that's great perspective. Yeah. So let's move on to this week. You had mentioned earlier actually getting to have some practice. So
yes.
When you come off the week that you had last week where you played 3 matches, and then but you have 2 huge opponents ahead, how do you go about approaching what you guys want to get done in practice this week?
Yeah, I think, again, it's not trying to overload them too much of just little tweaks here and there. Hey, this is where we're moving. This is the direction we're going in. And, it's just continuing to build off the great foundation that we've already set. And again, I think that approaching each team as its own entity, right? I think it's huge. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves. And, today we're focusing on Stanford, and then, we'll focus on Louisville as it comes. So, and I think there was a lot of great matches over the weekend, so it was cool to see everybody in action as well. And there's a lot of good volleyball happening, so it's cool.
So as you guys dive into Stanford, what are you seeing in that matchup? What are going to be the keys there?
Yeah, just a very well-balanced team. Obviously, Miner, their setter, does a really good job of balancing out their offense as well. And I think we're going to have to serve tough and block and defend well. But in general, they're just well coached, and they're going to come at us tough for sure.
When and you played here, you have a perspective of it, but how important are these kinds of matches in the non-conference to set up for what this team wants to do, not just in conference play, but moving forward into the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a good kind of snapshot of where we are. I obviously it's a fun match to play in. It's highly competitive, all those things. And I think I'm also getting used to being back in the college game, but I think that obviously the Big Ten is always tough as well, so it's kind of a good transition as we go into conference. But I just look at it as more of a snapshot of where we are. And, we're obviously want to be good now, but we want to be good in December as well. So how can we continue to grow and build? And, I think that's the greatest thing about being as a team is you learn something, or you're constantly, I don't say you always, but you're always learning something. So good or bad, there's always something to take from it.
So when you guys have these opportunities to have these practices, when you leave on the day, how do you go about and evaluating, okay, this was a good day? What goes into that practice that you feel like, okay, this was a great practice today?
Yeah.
Or I guess even as a staff, too.
Yeah, no, I guess for me, I judge based off of intentionality. How intentional are we with every single contact? And are we checked out? Are we really engaged in the next action, right? I think we could get so caught up about being, how do we want to feel at the end of this versus what's the here and now? And that's every single contact. And so you can judge based off of, making eye contact with each other as teammates, our communication before and after the play. Those things for me, obviously they translate to how you're actually performing, but just how they translate over time, I look for those little things. So again, back to intentionality, how intentional are we with every single contact? Because I think that translates most to game time. You
feel like this team's done a pretty good job with that?
Absolutely. I think that it's very rare that you don't see them coming into practice not dialed, and It's a hard job. It's a hard job being a student athlete, you know, a lot of distractions, and coming in every day and just like, hey, I'm going to get better today. So, and you see that engagement, and that's something that I strive for, is for them, is to, one, that they're enjoying themselves, but also when you're getting better, you're actually having a lot of fun. So can we push the envelope of getting better, even if you're failing to some degree?
Yeah, very cool. Well, how excited do you get for like these kinds of opportunities, or do you just try to take it one match at a time, nameless, faceless opponent?
Yes, I don't know, and maybe that's me detaching from the emotion of it all. But I've learned that the more you can just be as consistent as you can every day, regardless of what's happening, the better it is. There's no highs, I wouldn't say highs, lows, but just like you're there and you're seeing it for what it is. And today we're just trying to get better, and then we'll face whoever's on Wednesday. You know, I think that's just how I've tried to approach the game. So
Great stuff, great perspective. Thank you so much for being here with us.
yeah, it's great. Thank you.
And that is Jordan Larson here with us on The Dig, powered by Emeritus. Emeritus is proud to power this podcast and all of Husker women's sports. Thanks for listening and watching. And as always, make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen to never miss an episode right here on the Huskers Radio Network podcast.